Wednesdays. Really important subject today. It's not always how much you make. Everyone's talking, oh, I'm going to make this much. I'm going to do this much. And we find out we don't keep as much as we make. So this is so important for so many people that they just are so on to, I'm going to make money. I'm going to grow my money. I'm going to build wealth. That's great. But the problem is you are not able to keep it. So it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep and maintain. And I was just sharing backstage with a couple of our speakers, just different stories. What has happened if you don't do this? The other problems, things, people, I was just saying, people think they live forever. A friend, their uncle had a $20 million account, no will, no estate. It just went into probate. Now everyone is scrambling. There's just so many other friends that they started building an IRA for their kids. That's great for college to help them buy their first home. They didn't know they bought some NVIDIA stock. All of a sudden, the kids just took it at a certain age, right? Because it's theirs. And you may not want them to take it. So what can we do? How can we do? And especially for ourselves, structuring different entities. And really, this is the big thing. Many people talk to their clients about, oh, I can trade this, I can exchange this, I can make this. But believe it or not, some of your big clients may not have put all of their properties into an LLC, a trust or corporation, structured it right, wrote off the right taxes to save more so they can build their estate. So it's not like everyone's trying to always build their accounts. It's really, how do you structure it? How do you get professionals to help you? So I'm very excited to have Scott Conway and Todd Billingsley to share a little bit. Transglobal couldn't make it this time, but we'll do a follow-up about all of this good stuff of why, how, and some stories of how we can help you individually and most likely your clients. Scott, if you don't mind kind of sharing your background, and I know you have some presentations to share with everyone and maybe some stories, and then we'll go to Todd. We'll have some questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience so they can definitely connect with you, definitely put your information in so they can reach out. But this is such an important topic, and I can't believe we didn't start with this one first. Scott, go ahead.
Well, I'll begin with a little quick story that reminded me of something. Is I was in the global group, and we were talking about investment in Indonesia. And it reminded me of one of the biggest dollar disasters we had. Is there was a client whose family had international holdings. Well, as part of the international holdings, they owned a hotel in France. But when the whole matter went into the trust and the will, no one knew what the address was of this place. No one could hunt it down. By the time they figured it out, the ownership had changed. The owning corporation had liquidated the hotel. All of the money was gone, presumably paid out in bonuses to all of the people with the authority to do things. And by the time the family got to it, there was nothing left to be found and no legal way to get access to what happened, because it took them so long, because Dad didn't have all of the paperwork consolidated into one place so that everyone could instantly jump in and know where to go, what to do, who owned what, who had to be talked to, what had to be paid. So these things get to be messes. Now, when Dad built up this money, he was literally a billionaire when he died. And we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars between the moment of his death and it actually getting to his family, because the estate plan wasn't put together very well. But if you had asked him at any point in time while he was working as hard as he was working, like, why are you doing all of this? Why are you accumulating so much? He would have told you, I'm doing it for my family. I'm doing it for my kids. And ultimately, he didn't help his family. He didn't help his kids nearly as much as he had originally intended. So talking a little bit about what the plan is, I've got some cool new tech to share in my screen, if this works. Oh, and there I am, and I've got my screen. I'm going to talk about now, the top three, NOW. And if you want the report, because you want more information than I'm going to be sharing here in just a few minutes, you get that at ilovethemenough.com/exp, and that'll take you to where you can register to get the more in-depth report on that. And I think I actually have some videos on this particular one. I'd have to double check. Because who I am on all of this is you go, okay, well, I'm talking estates. I must be an estate lawyer. And I've been a lawyer since 1992. And the very first matter I was working on when I became a lawyer was an estate that was over my head. That I was working on this case because my life situation was similar to the life situation of the children of the deceased. And so they figured, well, they'll be able to relate to me and I'll be able to explain things to them in ways they'll understand. And it was a mess. Aside from being a lawyer, I'm also a martial arts grandmaster. So I see conflict being built. So I'm trained in conflict as a lawyer, trained in conflict as a martial artist. And sometimes we don't realize that we are setting up our families to fight. So as a pastor, I've done funerals, I've done the counseling for families. I've seen how devastated they are. And dealing with their pain and their rage and just how lost in all of it they were. And then that day I had to go back to the office to do some lawyer work. And I was thinking, how in the world is that family going to be able to handle a messy situation in their emotional state? And so all of that kind of informed what I do as an estate lawyer. It informed the issues that I see that's different than what they teach us in law school, and some things I've never seen in all of the continuing education training I've been doing for the last 30 years. So I talked about now, the top three. The first one is no, that N is no. When someone has no documents. Well, if you have no documents, one would presume you know you have a problem. But sometimes we just don't think about it because we figure, well, I'm not dying right now. I mean, I'll have time to get my affairs in order. And as James just shared, yep, the $20 million estate, no plan, no will, no trust. Now what? And what the what is now it's up to the state. Now it's even more complex when you have interstate or international holdings and no will, because then the family can start fighting for who runs to which court first. And now you can have competing probate courts and you can have things tied up for a year and a half just to figure out what court are we doing, who's going to be the actual executor, who do we issue the letters of administration to so people can actually do things. Of all the courts you can go to, probate court is the friendliest one. Their job is to just help you get this done. But then when you have family fighting over millions of dollars, fighting over real estate, now you have a competition that going on as to who gets to be the person running the probate. Which probate court is it going to be? So you want to make sure you don't end up with no documents. The advantage of having no documents, at least you know you have a problem. That you know you don't have a will, you know you don't have a trust. You know that means the government is just going to make decisions. The O is old. Now, that's when you have old documents. Now, most of the time with old documents, you may think you're done, and it's a maybe. If nothing's really changed since you drafted the documents, they'll still work for you. If you still live in the house that you lived in and it's in your documents, if you still own the businesses you own and it's worth about the same as it was when you drew up the documents, if maybe your documents say who you want to take care of your kids, and they're all adults now, but nothing's really changed, you might be fine. But if you bought property, you've sold property, some of your investments have taken off, some of your investments that are in the documents you no longer own or they've crashed, well, now it's not going to be quite as useful. Or sometimes with the old documents, they were so old, and this is some of the worst things I found. If I'm married and I drop documents to give everything to my wife, and then we get divorced and I forget, and then I get remarried, and my documents still give everything to my first wife. Then I die thinking I've taken care of my wife, thinking that she's just going to automatically get everything, but my will gives it all to my first wife, or worse, my trust gives it all to my first wife. And I completely forgot. And that was 20 years ago. I haven't even seen her for 15 years. Doesn't matter. She still gets it. And I have seen cases where after 40 years of marriage and the retirement fund had a death beneficiary, and that was the woman he was married to when he signed that paper over 40 years ago. And his current wife got nothing after 40 years of marriage. And that was incredibly sad with nothing we could do. So you have old documents. If things change, those are no longer good, but they are still legally controlling. Now, this is the one that annoys me the most. Wrong documents. Things are incorrect. The disadvantage here is that we think we're done and we're not, that something isn't accounted for correctly. Now, it could be because something changed and our documents are old. And you don't realize that that means you have more stuff to do. Another big one is you think that your property is in your trust, but turns out your property is in your own name. Or you think that you have it all set up to handle things, but then you formed an LLC and the LLC was never put in the trust. And so there's all of these things that you need to look at. And so, get the report, ilovethemenough.com/exp, and that will give you a little bit more of a dive into some information on that. I'm going to tell you about Mary's mistakes, to be more specific. Was she done? She thought she was done. Honestly, Mary had some of the best documents I've ever seen. She had a very complete trust. Now, I don't like trusts to be as detailed as her trust was, because if you're the trustee, you're constantly hunting through 70 pages of stuff to figure out what the heck am I supposed to do. But she had a very thorough trust. She had a very thorough will, but she owned commercial property. In her trust, that commercial property was set in a particular account in her trust to be split between her children from her first marriage. But she moved it from the trust to her own name so she could refinance it. And it never made it back into the trust. And because it never made it back in the trust, well, the trust no longer controls it. The trust can't say what happens to something it does not own. What ended up happening in the will is it got distributed to her second husband in what we call a pour over provision, because it wasn't accounted for in the will, but there was a clause in the will that basically says, and anything not specified in the trust or not specified in the will goes to my husband. Well, the husband got it. Her children got nothing from that property because there was a mistake. The ownership of that was incorrect. It was in the wrong place. She thought she was done. She had beautiful documents, but she didn't own the things the way she needed to own the things for the documents to do what she wanted the documents to do. But now here's another thing. If Mary didn't make that mistake, now this was something, when I was a young lawyer, I thought, well, if only we had this fixed. Well, the senior lawyer had some information to share with me and said, well, if Mary didn't make that mistake, we have another problem, is that she was leaving her children a strip mall that she managed herself. She didn't have a property management company. She did it herself because she was expert enough to do all of that. Her children didn't know anything about property ownership at all. They never owned a home. They never owned a condo. They never owned real estate, much less a commercial landlord. They had no idea what their obligations would have been. They had no idea what the rights would have been. Nobody had any idea where all the contracts were for the leases, for all of the tenants, because Mary just took care of all of it. And now all of a sudden, Mary's gone. And so when you're dealing with all of these things of the now, which is no, old, and wrong, that you need to take a look at these things from time to time. You need to keep them up to date, because when they get out of kilter, it can make a mess for our state. And how many of us, especially as we get older or our health comes into question, we feel like we're working to take care of our families. We're making sure our kids are taken care of. We're making sure that a widow or a widower will be taken care of, that we want all of our hard work, all of the stuff that we built to take care of our people. But if we don't set it up right, we can die thinking that we've done a good job. And then the whole thing just evaporates. And so as part of the plan, the estate plan, when you're talking the huge estates of $10 million, $20 million, there's a lot of tax planning that goes into that too, because the taxes on estates can be as much as 40%. Imagine you thought you left an extra $10 million to your grandkids and you didn't. You left $6 million, but you could have left $10 million. And imagine being the kids and you're just absolutely devastated, and you go in to figure out the estates and you're looking for the documents. You don't know where they are. You finally find them, and they're from when you were a kid. And you're thinking, well, I don't see the house in here. I think, like, didn't they buy a rental property somewhere? Does anyone know where that is? And what kind of mess that could be? And there's a lot of things. If you don't get it done in time, you can end up losing property and losing opportunity. And in particular, I like talking to the real estate profession on this because real estate transactions are at the heart of most of the biggest problems I've seen in the States. And I've dropped my information in the chat if you want to get a copy of that now report. And if you want to connect with me on Facebook or on LinkedIn, that's in there too, or see more of what I do, you have your links in there.
Scott, thank you so much. You know, it's so important. And I think we're always talking about trying to sell property, do this, but, you know, figuring out the states and definitely setting up LLCs. We've seen horror stories where you didn't set up LLCs, connects you all together for liability. I mean, if you've been in this business long enough, you've heard some doozies of stories, right? Let alone with our next expert, with Todd Billings, working on stocks and bonds and wealth management and preserving. I mean, these all are puzzle pieces that every good commercial real estate agent needs to know how to plug in, because those are the clients you want. We always say we want to grow with our clients, right? They started with some small house. They flipped it because there was so much equity. They bought a commercial building or a multifamily, and you kept growing with them 20, 30 years, growing their portfolio. A lot of times this is what happens. They're older than you. They transfer it to their kids or grandkids. And if you're not there kind of knowing or helping them set up or finding the attorney, you're going to be cut out a lot of times. So if you are involved, this preserves you from the father or parents and the grandparents to the kids or the grandkids, right? This is the transfer of being an expert so you stay in this game longer. But Todd, I want to have you share some of your stories. I mean, you ran some big money. You saw some big players, you know, playing with stocks. We always say, are you a real estate guy or are you a
Yep.
stocks and bonds guy? But love for you
Yeah.
to share your story, your background, and
Yep.
also what you've seen and some of your advice. Obviously, you know,
Yeah.
talk to professionals, and this is not advice for anyone, but just, you know, getting some ideas of where to go. But Todd, if you
Yeah.
can share.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. My name is Todd Billings. I'm actually new to the EXP family and happy to be here. I come from managing a multifamily office where I managed all the financial affairs for six wealthy families, ranging from 10 million of liquidity to over a billion of liquidity. And prior to that, I worked for Bank of America's private banking division called U.S. Trust. And so, I was really kind of that intermediary between all of the various professionals, from portfolio managers to estate planning attorneys to wealth strategists to family members, and it really is a unique position to be in because you really get to see things from the family perspective, and that's a unique one because many times we come as professionals with the knowledge or intent to help or to serve, but many times we may be on the outside and we don't really get to see some of the emotion behind these decisions. And one of my family's great entrepreneur, never went to college, immigrated from Italy to Canada, ultimately came to the United States, built a huge business. He actually, prior to coming to the United States, he had 1,200 doors that he rented. But ultimately ended up building a very large business in the adhesives and grout business. He was fortunate to, turn that business into a multi-billion-dollar business, and then sold his interest to his partners. And I say many times that's like the greatest day and the worst day for entrepreneurs, because on one hand they've kind of made it. On the other hand, they now have all of this money and they're not necessarily used to managing money. First of all, they're used to managing a business and cash flow and operations, but they're not used to managing just cash and what do I do with it. And two, it starts to create all of these new challenges that were not there before. And I remember specifically being in a family meeting with his name is Nick, his wife is Yolanda, being in a family meeting with them, with the estate planning attorney that I found and recommended for them. Great attorney, very patient. But it got awkward at times because Nick had something that he wanted to do. He wanted to give money to charities and different causes that he cared about. His wife cared about giving it to the family members. And mind you, they didn't have any children. They weren't able to have kids. And I just remember one point where it's like, you've been with me from the beginning. You take your half, I'll take my half. You do what you want, I'll do what I want. And it's interesting because these are times where it should be like success. Like this is what we choose. We're hoping to get to that point in our careers, and yet it does come with a lot of stress and challenge for families. And so the one thing that I'll tell you, as Scott mentioned, is you want the transfer of wealth to be something that is great for the family and not so troublesome. And part of making it great for the family involves the planning, involves having advisors around that are going to help direct and make sure not only is the plan created, and I'm sure Scott can also attest to this. Many times people will create wills and trusts and all of these things, and they never put assets in the actual entities. And it's like they thought they had it covered, but they didn't actually do the most important part, which is actually putting the assets into these various entities. And so your ability to connect with people and give them, not saying you need to be the attorney. I was not the attorney, but your ability to be knowledgeable about these facts will separate you from the crowd as it relates to, oh man, this person isn't just trying to sell me a piece of real estate or help me buy something or sell something for me. They really are looking at it from a different perspective, and that is going to get you out of the, let me get a lower rate or commission or some other fee thing, because you're providing a whole nother level of value. And as Scott mentioned, you could be paying 40% in taxes, and to the right investor, that's worth far more than any commission change that may be on a deal. And so I'm going to share my screen for a minute. This is something that hopefully, can you see my screen? It says 156 million in assets.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Why does it matter? There's 156 trillion in assets in the United States, and this breaks it down by generation. 78 million, or 50%, is controlled by baby boomers. About 30% is controlled by Generation X, or $46 trillion. This silent generation, 18.6, and millennials, 13.3. And as we all know, this baby boomer generation has been driving the US economy for decades. And just real estate alone is $18.3 trillion. Equities and mutual funds, $19 trillion. Pensions, $19.2 million. Private businesses, almost $8 trillion. And all of these assets are going to transfer to the next generation. So it matters that we are equipped and knowledgeable about the basics, and that we have resources to help guide people through some of the most important decisions they're going to make, because not only have the baby boomers in particular made it, but these other generations are going to inherit it. And I just wanted to really emphasize that. Another thing that I'd like to share with you that I think is hilarious, and hopefully you'll be able to hear the audio, but this is a kid playing the game of Monopoly. I think we all should love this game. But if you haven't seen it, I think it's a great little excerpt.
Oh my gosh.
Where's all your money gone, buddy?
Taxes. 9, 10, 11. Let me fix my houses. It's okay. It's part of the game. No, it's not. It's not fun. It's not fun to what? It's the worst part of the game. Oh, it's what? Taxes.
So I hope that made a few of you laugh a little bit, but it's so true. It's the worst part of the game.
God, I'm just saying it's so timely. The extension was due yesterday. I had to write a big check.
Exactly.
Hey,
It's the
Jim.
worst.
Hey,
It's
we are in what they call some kind of disaster area, and our taxes are now not due till next May 1st, if you can believe that.
Oh wow.
Georgia, us, Carolinas, whatever.
There's
Man.
pluses and minuses to that, because then you have to remember.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
So I
anything more to kind of finish
yeah,
out? So
yeah. So
yeah,
I'll
but that was
finish out
great.
here. Let me finish out here, and then we'll move on. And I won't. I don't want to duplicate anything that Scott already did. So he's already covered a lot of it. You know, I love Jim's title. It's not what you make; it's what you keep. My phone number and emails at the bottom. Todd Billings. I'm fortunate. I had started. First person in my family to go to college. I grew up in South Central LA. Ultimately went to Johns Hopkins to be pre-med. Later transferred to Stanford, got a degree in economics, and then I worked on Wall Street in investment banking, traded municipal bonds for Payne Weber, was a NASDAQ market maker, and then I got into the private client side of the business, which really opened my eyes to all of these challenges that families have to deal with. And as you go through the stages of raising capital and building relationships, you're always trying to get to wealthier and wealthier clients if you want to make more money. And fortunately, I got to be in the room with, a few billionaire families, and you start to learn that many of these things matter, not only to them, but to many families who obviously even have a lot less. And so let me see if I can skip through here. Here, definitions. I think, this is basic, and I'm happy to share this presentation. The process, what the definition, organizing and managing one's assets to ensure they're properly distributed and protected according to one's wishes, both during and after death. Key documents, what are the things that we're really looking at? Federal estate tax and exemptions, gifting strategies and the gift tax, trusts for tax efficiency, capital gains tax in real estate, and obviously 1031s, which many of us are aware of. Different things that are important around asset protection, charitable giving, legacy planning, succession planning, various pitfalls, failing to plan, not having enough liquidity is probably one of the biggest ones, and why life insurance agents are a huge part of the plan typically. And then, as Scott also mentioned, not updating the estate plan or reviewing it regularly. Different kinds of taxes, don't hold these to specifics, but obviously there are different taxes for different types of entities. And we've already kind of talked about these, but John F. Kennedy said the time to repair the roof is when the sun is shining, right? And that's true. You want to deal with these things before the problems occur. And something so simple that I found really helpful. Let me see if I can find this real quick. Was where is it? Bear with me. My document went away. But like something really simple, which you guys may have, we've all probably seen Susie Orman, but even something very simple, and I don't recommend this for, everyone or very wealthy families, but even for us as professionals ourselves, one of the best ways to just make sure we have basic things: a living revocable trust, a will, financial power of attorney, a health directive. For $99 with an online program, you can at least have something in place for yourself, for your family, and at least start thinking about these things. And I remember Zig Ziglar, one of my favorite sales coaches. He used to walk into a room of insurance agents, and he would ask insurance agents, which of you in the room have life insurance? And the ones that had the most life insurance would inevitably become the best insurance agents. And I think in the same way as we're advising people, not only saying these things are important, but that we make them important to us as well. So I would encourage everyone to, even if it's $99, having something is better than nothing. And I appreciate everyone's time, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or would love to connect.
Oh, thank you. That
Yeah.
was that was amazing, especially the taxes. So timely since yesterday was the extension date. Everyone had to finalize that. But you know, this is the problem where if you're very wealthy, you don't actually file on time because you have all these entities, K1s, different reportings, different pieces come in late. You want to strategize, and you're right. The time to fix anything is before. You know, so a lot of times you don't want to scramble, and we've all been there where they needed advice. Oh, do you have the attorney? Do you have a probate attorney? Do you have this attorney? Do you have this CPA? Because they're scrambling, and something that just happens all of a sudden. But that's great advice to just talk to somebody, try to get as much as you can, at least in some documentation. But then these are the things that everyone brought up is the follow-ups, right? The making sure that it's current. And sometimes, well, we all know with government, sometimes they put new structures, new benefits that you have to move things, create new entities, especially the larger you have, the more you have to say. But it does, you are so right, starts now with the mindset of the insurance agent. And that's where Transglobal will have them again. We'll have to do a part 2 is having the insurance. What do you use the insurance? How do you set up the entities? How do you do charitable remainders, right? All of these good things, and the bigger and bigger you get, it gets complicated. But that's why a lot of people say, well, they don't pay taxes. And I love that you brought that chart up. There's the income tax where we pay the most. But think about this. This is something I learned from my mentor. The 2 things to write off the most taxes, get a business and buy real estate. So if you know how to do this with experts on your team, talking to your clients, oh boy, you are so valuable. And this is the best thing too, when things change, right? Because sometimes the parents or grandparents or the person you were dealing with was the main person. Their kids take over, their grandkids take over. They don't have a relationship with you. You're not the one. They have some other people. So if you want to stay building with your clients, even to the point where you pass your business to your kids or grandkids, that you build this relationship, friendships, knowing how to serve and help them. It's just very powerful. So Scott, I want to share with you, what are some simple tips anyone and everyone here could just apply and use to really benefit them for their own estate, you know, hopefully building bigger to helping their clients?
Well, here's a big part about being a real estate professional working with clients with their estates is ask them, like, how do you want to take ownership? Is there a potential future trustee that we should include? Are there potential future inheritors that we should include in the conversation? And one of the things that gets overlooked with estate planning a lot is that the owner of the property and the business doesn't only disappear if they die. So my mother right now is 79 years old, and she's really healthy, but her neighbor has Alzheimer's dementia. So the neighbor has a problem in that if she owns property, if she has been handling things on her own, she's beginning to lose a few steps. And if nobody knows where her stuff is, if nobody knows what her stuff is, and she turns over the trusteeship to someone else, the trustee can only manage what they know about. And so we need to make sure we include these extra people in the conversations so that as professionals, when the family wants to do something, they already know us. And when we know something's going on, then we have other family members that we can call. So if we're getting these random calls from our client and go, this sounds like our client's losing a step or two, because they're calling, asking about things that haven't been true for 15 years. And, you know, Mary gives you a call and she's complaining about, well, what's going on with my apartment building? And you think, I helped you sell that apartment building 8 years ago. So it's not yours. What did someone steal my apartments? And you go, okay, if you don't know who the trustees are, you have no one you can call. And so just for good business, we do that for ourselves, and coaching our clients through some of the things is all of this information needs to be in some central place. And I like multiple copies. Because if I have a stack somewhere that has all of my papers in a file, but nobody but me knows where this file is, nobody but me knows that this even exists, it's tucked away for security purposes as in a passworded file on my computer, and I'm the only one who knows the password. I can do all these things that make me really, really safe and lock out my inheritors. And so we need to be having these conversations just for good business and for ourselves as we build up our own assets and we set things up for ourselves.
Thank you, Scott. Todd, also, I know everyone loves to be where you're at, dealing with the billionaires, right? So how did you start building the trust, right? From starting to obviously different types of conversation skill sets to talk to family offices and really people with the net worth of even hundreds of millions to the billions of dollars.
I would say two things. One, when I was working at Bank of America, I was in a position where I covered multiple branches in the South Florida market. And I realized in short order compared to my competition, and when I say competition, my colleagues in the private bank, US Trust, they were more of the people that sat in the ivory tower, looked at reports for large deposits. And if someone made a large deposit in the consumer bank or the commercial bank or something, they would try to reach out and make a relationship there. I took a different approach. I went to each of the branches, and each branch probably had anywhere from 25 to 30 employees. And I would just sit down with the people in the branch and say, hey, the bank has hired me to work with our wealthiest clients. I do all of these things. You don't know who I am, but what I do want you to know who I am and what I do. And I would sit down with each and every one of them and help them do 529 plans for their kids, set up a financial plan for themselves, do their own 401k rebalancing, look at their stock options or different things that they had. And because they knew me, I now had 20 to 25 or 25 to 30 salespeople in each branch. And let's say I covered 5 branches. Now I had 120 plus salespeople that knew Todd Billings. And so I literally would get calls from a teller who had a great relationship with people at the bank and say, hey, Todd, I have Mike here. He's depositing a large sum of money. I really think he should talk to you. And I think it comes down to like being one of the first people in people's lives when they are making money. All of the relationships that I built were with first generation wealth creators. It was not legacy families that had lots of money throughout history. It was really first generation wealth creators. And I think that's the opportunity for most of us because we don't necessarily come from that crowd or have those connections. And many of those families already have a whole lot of advisors around them already. If you try to get into the Hilton family, good luck, right? I mean, there's already everyone there, right? But if you find the first generation wealth creator who just sold his or her business, who just sold a large real estate portfolio or is about to do those things, those are people that I connected with. And so, by doing it one by one, building good relationships with everyone. That's how my first client that had over $100 million came from another banking referral, and they knew me and they introduced me. And we want those personal introductions where we can leverage the trust of others. And so I'd say that was start one. And then as I performed well for one client, my client with 100 million, who I thought had a lot of money, he said, I want you to meet my friend Gabby, who has a lot of money. And when someone with 100 million tells you that someone has a lot of money, you're like, wow, I definitely want to meet that guy too. And then when I met Gabby and their family owns a ton of different brands, clothing, real estate, etc. He later introduced me. He said, hey, Todd, I want to introduce you to Elliot. Let me tell you the kind of guy Elliot is. I had started a private equity fund, and each of the investors were putting in approximately $12 million. So it was going to be like 36 million of equity. We were getting credit facilities to do other things. And so Elliot was going to be the third partner putting in $12 million. And Gabby, I'm walking him back to the car. He had come by my office and he says, let me tell you the kind of guy Elliot is. I told Elliot, he can send his money, where to send it. And he says, where do I send the $36 million? And he said, Elliot, it's not 36. We're each putting in 12. He said, okay, where do I send the 12? Right. And my point in telling that story is one person leads to another who leads to another. And it's just doing a good job in each one of those cases. And the thing that really humbled me more than anything was realizing that I wasn't there to make them money. You know, when you're working with smaller clients, you kind of feel this sense of, I'll say, ego or pride, like I can really help you do better and help you make money. But when you start working with people who are probably far beyond anything that I'll ever have, it becomes very humbling to say, okay, what is my real value proposition? What can I really do? And I broke it down to something very simple. It was, you know, I'm here to be a financial translator so that these clients can make a better, more informed decision because they're not professionals that know all of these things that we're talking about. They may know their business, adhesives and grout, clothing, whatever it is, but they don't necessarily know the things that we're talking about. And my job is just to translate that information and put it into their hands so that they can make a better decision because they're great business people if you get to $1 billion. And one final thing that I'll say, Jim, is I didn't realize as a young man, and this was a little bit more personal, when I was about 5 years old, my dad had stage 4 lung cancer. And I remember my mom crying on a couch every night because she worked at Safeway supermarket as a checker. My dad was a detail man, and her husband was dying. He had, 99% chance of dying. And we couldn't afford medication for him. And it didn't make sense to me as a young kid. And I remember praying to God and saying, God, please, let us win the lottery so that we could pay for my dad's medication. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, kids, you have such faith. You have this faith that's unshakable. And I said, Mom, you have to go buy a lottery ticket. You have to buy a lottery ticket. We're going to win. She's like, okay, we bought a lottery ticket. And as you can imagine, we didn't win. And I just realized at that moment, I was so confused because it didn't make sense that my dad couldn't get medicine that he needed because of money. And so internally, I actually thought the world would be better without money. I hated money internally. And whenever you hate something, you kind of limit its ability to come into your life. Many years later, when I was at Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins, I realized I had this deep seated hate for money. And I created a new belief because my belief had been for years, the world would be better without money because of this specific pain in my life. And I changed my belief statement. And my belief statement is, I'm a money magnet. Money floods into my life because I'm God's custodian. And that fundamental shift, that little belief change allowed me to go from raising $60 million in a year, my first year at US Trust, to raising $120 million in the next 6 months. And those little belief changes, how you approach life and what you think, I would challenge each one of us to really think about your relationship with money, with wealth, with these topics we're talking about, and realize that many of our beliefs, we've either attained them through some pain or trauma in our life, or we inherited it from our parents, but maybe look at them and say, hey, is there something that I can say, this is what I choose to believe. I choose to believe that I'm a money magnet. Money floods into my life because I'm God's custodian. That's a completely different belief statement than I hate money and the world would be better without money. It doesn't mean that wasn't a valid pain for me, but it was something that I had the power to change.
Thank you for sharing. No, I definitely know we got to do a part 2 and putting a plan together to help people because, to have the right mindset, have the right network, people you can plug in, sharing the story with all your clients and really using it. And you're right, you need to grow with, I know when I first started in commercial, they said, don't go after the big people because they already have the top brokers in the whole, state or the whole region that they go, unless they die or something happens to them, they break the trust, right? We all know trust is the most largest key about this. So starting and growing with people, but giving them the wisdom, building this up, but having a plan for yourself. And a lot of times I said, start early, compounding, even if it's small. And I love too, what you said with the insurance, those that bought the largest, thinking about this, were the money magnets, to bring this in. So powerful. And I definitely think there's a part 2 of how to embrace money, not hate it, and draw it in and get the experts so everyone can figure out this plan to build wealth And we all talked about financial freedom. So you can do your passion, your purpose, giving back, helping others, save the whales, right? Dig wells to get clean water, right? There's a lot of good things we could do if we were free from the 9 to 5. But I want to open this up to some of our audience to see if they have any questions. But this is powerful stuff, as you can see, very knowledgeable. This is their expertise, and they've seen so much. Any questions? Keith or Max, Nelson. But one thing
Well,
I'll just say
I will
this too.
say
OZs
that, I will say that investing in upgrading properties opens the door to a lot of incentives and tax deductions and credits that would really be useful for, well, to offset income.
Well, that's the one big thing my mentor said, get a business. We should all set up a side hustle business, and we're all 1099, so we're entrepreneurs. That's our business. But when you start doing what we do, which many people are in real estate, buy real estate, learn, invest in it so you figure it out. But that's why OZs were pretty powerful, because it is that shelter that you put in. Granted, you got to know the business, finding the right OZs to the other ones. But this is how all the puzzle pieces fit together, and experts that you need to surround yourself with to really get the best information and who you need to go to. Any other questions? Caesar, Blair? I'm just calling on people I see. Dorothy?
Well, and related to that, and a lot of what Todd was talking about with the business builders, the people who built their own wealth, sometimes their children have no idea how to build, how to protect. And if they have no relationship with the professionals that were helping mom or dad, then stuff can crash and burn. One of the stories connected to my WTF report is about Mark, who thought his son Ken was ready to take over the company, left it to Ken. Ken was in a panic. It's easy to come up with ideas when you're sitting in dad's office talking about stuff dad should do. But then when he's sitting behind the big desk and he's realizing, I don't know the people, I don't know the business, I have ideas, but I have no idea how to keep this thing alive long enough to do anything. And in a admittedly wise panic, he liquidated before he killed the business, but he lost, I think it was between 30 and 50% of the value that he could have gotten had dad properly prepared him, or if he had had the relationships with dad's advisors. And so, we can be part of that professional team. And if we're the ones building our own real estate portfolio and our business portfolio, to have the team and make sure that our team has relationships with, our husbands and wives, with our children and grandchildren, with whoever our executor and trustee is going to be, so there can be some continuity that doesn't require us to be here. Now, here's one of the really cool things. If you do stuff the way, Todd and I are talking about, is it's not just for when I die. If I have other people that can know how to run things, know where everything is, I can take a vacation. I can decide, you know what? I'm in the mood. I want to go to Italy. I've been looking to go to Rome and Venice. I'm going to be gone for 3 months. Run the company for me. And they can. If I get sick, if I get T-boned in a car, as much driving as I do, and I'm out of commission for 6 weeks, someone can step in and take things over, but only if the relationships exist and only if all the paperwork is known and organized in the right way for all of that to be possible.
So those of us,
Krista brought in.
I was going to say, those of us without children, I guess the best thing to do would be, outside of our spouse, we probably should find some couple of great people that we love each other, I guess you could say, that we have faith and we trust each other and it just works out. And they need to become intelligible of our business, correct? That's probably the best way to do it.
Yes.
If you don't have siblings even, so.
Well, and in one case, like I have one of my business partners went down for 17 days. We did not know if she was going to live or die for those 17 days. When she finally came out of that, her doctors told her, get your affairs in order because there's a 50% chance you'll die in the next 18 months. And for those 17 days, there were 3 of us that know so much about her business. We kept her business running for those 17 days. We supported her in her business for the months afterwards. At one point, she had the live seminar to teach. I am literally behind her, physically holding her up, that she's capable of talking, but she's not capable of staying in front of her audience. And she's beginning to slump down and like lose her. I'm helping prop her up literally. And if she didn't have people who loved her at that level, that Kimberly, Jenny, and I couldn't have kept her business going, wouldn't have been motivated to if we didn't have the relationship. And her children weren't qualified to teach her stuff, but 3 of us were. So we were her backup. And so if you don't have family that will be those people, have somebody who will be those people. And none of us are employees, but we're close friends who know her material. And then I have the same. Virginia's the same thing for me. If I have talks to do and I go down, she knows my slides, she knows my content. She can step in and she can take over for me. And she knows all the tech. So she can even go run my funnels and run my websites and keep everything going if I go down for the count to make sure that my mother gets taken care of. So it's not always going to be your kids, and it's not even always going to be your spouse, but it should be somebody who cares about your family and cares about your assets. And for that, that's part of building an ohana.
Thank you, Scott. No, and there's a question from Chris. Yes, this is the chance, as the largest transfer of wealth is happening, to get very educated, finding who you can work with, and kind of putting plans, even if we always say start with the will, and they could get, build from that, get more complicated. So we definitely will do another one on this. But Todd, I want to give you any final words before we break, but we'll do a part 2 because I definitely see this as a huge advantage to give people for yourself, your clients, and the transfer of wealth of how to make sure everyone's prepared. Final words, Todd?
Yeah, no, I just appreciate everyone's time. I can't help but laugh at the kid playing Monopoly, because it's something that is innate for all of us, right? In fact, before this call, I was actually talking to my wife and my 27-year-old son, and I was saying to my son, let's say you make $100, and he's not in a high tax bracket, but let's say that $20 goes in taxes. That leaves him with 80. He then takes his 80 to go buy some clothes. He's got sales tax, say 7%, depending where you live. So now there's another $6 gone. And then that business made the $80, and the $80 gets taxed because that business just made some money. And they pay employees who then do the same thing. And it's, and we're not even getting to the point of estate taxes and things of that sort. And it's like, man, there's I think the topic came up because my wife, she's a baker. We used to have a bake shop, amazing stuff. And she's going to get, her shoulders were hurting. She's getting some dry needling done. And she was making scones and saying, yeah, I'm making scones for Pat, who's doing the dry needling. And he's going to do it for free. And I'm giving him scones. I'm like, see, that's great bartering. There's no taxes involved, right? And I just say all of this because I think it can be a really fun topic. Don't make it so heavy. Unfortunately, most of the people who talk about estate planning in people's lives tend to be insurance agents. And it's not something any of us really like to talk about. What's going to happen when you die and who's going to get money when you die? But if you can make it a little bit more fun, bring up real pain, i.e., a kid playing a game, he got the card, we had to pay real estate taxes. It's painful. And I think the more you can just be a human and have fun with it, it's going to go a lot farther than trying to be, so serious about a very serious topic. But just, hey, let's do it one step at a time. None of these things happen overnight, and just build a relationship of trust. That's my biggest advice.
Todd, thank you. Scott, thank you so much. And join us to get some more information, the slide deck with Top Agent Nation. Backstage Pass, it's free to sign up, get the slides, and then there'll be more to come on how to connect. And many of the commercial topics that we had, we're going to go deeper because it's very superficial, very surface level currently, but we will want to go deeper for those that want to go deeper, maybe inviting your clients so they can see. So these are kind of the next steps, educating all of you to then educating your clients and helping you, right? Because we all know you can't do it by yourself. You need a team, a network, a group that you can rely on and plug in. So everyone, have a great Wednesday. See everyone next Wednesday on Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays. Have a great day.
Thank you.